that.
Tina.
Hey everyone, we're Miralab. I'm Amanda Tassi, team lead, creative director, and art lead. And we also have, which is too many names, sorry. We also have Will Hellworth, who is lead design, and Matt Kane is now co-lead with me. And Brian DeBoer is lead engineer, and Tanya Feng is lead producer. So Miralab is a 3D PC downloadable game built in Unity, in which you play as an immortal jellyfish, helping to restore life to your home reef that has become barren. You play through different stages of your life cycle as you explore this complex ecosystem, activating seeds and recording and playing memories along the way. So Miralab continues to be very much about exploration and moments of open play. But since midterm, we've also been developing some moments of linear gameplay, which Matt will talk a little bit more about.
Hi, everybody. So like Amanda said, our game is still very much about exploring an open world, exploring a deterministic open ecosystem as the setting. But around midterm, for a while we've been having regular playtesting sessions, and we've noticed that while our development efforts have been to create a lot of depth in our ecosystems, a lot of players weren't able to appreciate that because they're fairly obscured for a beginner's perspective. So to alleviate that, we have decided to go pretty hard in kind of deviating a little bit from the idea of completely open world system to having elements in our level design that are very linear and are very much about teaching the player how the world works. Where we are right now is what we're calling level 0. This is our prehistoric hub. This is the kind of the prelude to the whole game. And this is not part of the linear gameplay section. It's still supposed to be more open, and it is intentionally not supposed to be something that the player completely understands. The idea here is to introduce the player to the concept that the ecosystem exists and it's something to be curious about. And while we're here, I'll kind of just go into some of the systems. So basically, in kind of going with that development direction, we've had kind of two vectors that we've been trying to kind of simultaneously work on. One of them was building out the system's completeness and cohesion of our ecosystems and our player systems so that they're more compelling and they are more rewarding once you do engage with them. And the other vector was to really work on the level design of our linear content. So while we're here, I'll kind of point out some of our new systems developments, which include the player coloring behaviors. I guess it's going to be a little bit hard to consider them right here, but basically the way it worked before was that our player made very rigid transitions between colors, and in playtesting we realized that that didn't read very well because it looked really important and it was kind of subtle in how important it was. We addressed this by having a more complex system for coloring that is essentially you make transitions around the color wheel, and it's a lot more subtle, and we're all pretty happy with it, and it's kind of given it more, it's more appropriate for the context of the system. In addition, you'll notice that there are varying levels of brightness both on the player and on the different actors and animals across the environment. And that's representative of our new system called Vitality, which is kind of our uber life system that kind of encompasses the entire concept of what it means to eat and to be damaged and to die. Basically, as anything eats, it gains vitality, it gets brighter. And certain things gain vitality passively, like pillow anemones and kelp, over time, and they're the producers of the ecosystem. And other things leak vitality, and to compensate for that, they hunt other things and they steal vitality from them and they eat it, like fish, for example. And so that kind of drives a lot of the kind of tying together of that system and preparing to make it more engaging for players to get around to that. So another one of the systems that we've been really building out is audiovisual feedback across the board and trying to add layers of visual polish. And it's an ongoing process, but we've made significant headway in terms of audio polish, which, because we're using a system called Fmod to create fully dynamic audio, which I'll let Will go into.
Thanks. So this is one of the things that I'm really excited we got to show in time for the presentation. We've been working on it really hard, so shout outs to our entire sound team. But as you'll notice, the sound, or rather the music specifically, didn't really kick in until Brian saw that first group of little purple pillow anemones, which are one of our different actor types. They're our static actors, like plants. And similarly, this different kind of ambient layer wasn't added until he started getting more towards the kelp. And this has to do with our the way that we're generating music in this. So we incorporated audio into the project very early, considering the time frame of most of the final games. Right from the beginning, we were kind of thinking of what is the most interesting thing we can do with audio. And so right now, this is showing a very small example of how we're driving it, which is basically the player is reporting what types of plants and how many of them are around them at any given time to Fmod, and then each plant is associated with a specific loop or a type of musical playback, and then those all contribute to the overall musical theme, keeping it different every time and different in every zone, and but also giving the player a very good context of what's around them. Once they start to get a feel for the system, they'll know just by walking into an area, even if they haven't seen anything, the kinds of things they'll be about to run into and mess with. So some of the other big feedback things we've been doing come in the form of like what Matt was saying with the vitality, but also with our animation. As you can see now, these kelp and all the other fishes are affected slightly by an overall current. And we kind of went with that and the bubble particle effects, basically, to sell the underwater more than the bloom or the blur as we were using beforehand, although we are still using a depth of field type thing. And another huge thing is what you can see in the main screen here is that we've changed our ocean currents to a particle effect rather than these blue cubes. And you can see some kelp getting pushed by those right now to really indicate to the player that there's some kind of force being applied there. So right now we're coming to the end of level 0. This is kind of like our little demonstration level for you guys right now. The idea in the final game is that level 0 will just be throwing the player in headfirst to our systems and kind of going, here's what is possible in the environment. You don't need to understand it right now, but just kind of take a look at it. And when they revert after level 0 and go to level 1, this is kind of the first part of our linear tutorialization. So here, there's just a dark room. You can see these little hidey hole fish in this wall. You can hear the pillow and enemy theme coming on. But you can't get through that when they're there. They're like stones in a brick wall, basically. And the only thing that the player can do here is interact with this pillow and enemy. And so we can very basically show you the easiest way to interact with the environment. If you make food, fish will come and get it. And you can see also the very easiest direct way of how this helps you out. These guys are now no longer blocking this through. So this hidey hole fish, as we've been calling him, has been kind of key to our design, and it shows kind of our focus towards goals and kind of direction a little bit more, as they are used primarily as a gate that either blocks the player or blocks currents or changes some kind of state in the environment. And so we want to, in this first part of the level, or the first part of the game, excuse me, that we're doing for Demo Day, show the player what their one-to-one action, consequences of their actions are when they are hitting these different pillow enemies and being able to manipulate where the fish are. So here you can see that the same home pattern, these little blocks that they can live in, is right here, but it's unoccupied and there's a big current coming out of it that kind of gates the player, essentially. And so they have to take what they kind of had to do in the first part of it and then the second part of any good tutorial, which is using it in a slightly more open context. So you see you have this path of pillow enemies that you can use to lure the fish from one to the other. And this is all kind of showing the player, this is how we solve puzzles in Miralab. Not directly, not by kind of bashing it down with your head, but by having a deep understanding of the environment around you and kind of manipulating the needs of different fish and different plants to accomplish goals and to get places, to new environments. So you'll see, there's some cute. They're coming over to eat the new food now, and when they get tired, or when there's no food around, they'll go towards the nearest kind of rest point, which will be these guys by the current here. Hopefully that'll block up the current and kind of let us into a new area. This kind of gate, this very one directional, only one path forward gate is something we're going to resolve, kind of only use for the tutorial, and it's basically mimicking how the entire structure of the game is going to mimic the phases of the life cycle of this jellyfish. So level 0, which we showed you at first, kind of mimics the baby phase in that it's visually very distinct. You don't really know what's going on. You have some control, but it's mostly just kind of taking it in. And then level 1, our tutorial, and we call that one level 0, is kind of like our teen phase, which we're implementing next semester. But the idea is it's very similar to the adult here, but you're constrained by height, and you are more about setting up your next life rather than you are about accomplishing goals right there. And then finally, our plans for next semester in level 2 will kind of symbolize the adult phase, which is what you're in right now. Open choice, open-ended objectives, and kind of a little bit more tricky, but a little bit more rewarding and empowering for the player. So you guys are probably wondering about the objectives. One of the big feedback the biggest piece of feedback we got from midterm was to have a clear direction for the player. And so while you can't see it on the micro level here, we've kind of decided on an overall progression for Miralab, which will be collecting different bioluminescent animals and bringing them back to the hub, which you saw in level 0, and kind of restoring that place to its fullness of life. And then every time you bring back a new guy, he lights the way to a different part of the world, which is now accessible. So level 1, this tutorial is all about bringing the first bioluminescent animal back to. So I think we're gonna, let's see, this is now in the 3rd room of our tutorial. And I believe here is where it starts to branch a little bit more. This is kind of giving a player a clue of our nonlinear systems. Right now, there's 2 paths. One of them has these sharkies in them, and the other one is kind of more of a plant-focused path with new plants in it. Right now, I think Brian's going to probably just try and juke out this shark. But one of the other things you can do is get a bunch of fish to follow you. And he'll go after them instead. There's our roller. Okay, so he didn't make it past the shark, and this is our reversion, basically. And I'll give this to Amanda to talk about the blob phase, but also to talk about our art style and what's been going on in that.
So that sharky always makes me laugh. Okay, so now we're in the blob phase. And so why does the blob phase look different? It's supposed to mimic you kind of just died and started to revert. And so you've blacked out a little bit, and you've ended up... and you've ended up in this more primitive geometric line shader world, like Harry and the Purple Crayon. No, I don't know if that's... But anyway, and so in this phase, you have the unique ability to seed and activate seeds, which will then influence the procedurally generated objects, which will be in your next environment when you grow to be an adult. So each phase directly influences the next phase, this being the embryo blob phase. And then you're also eating, and so as you're eating, you gain vitality, and the world becomes more and more light. And that's how you progress to the adult phase over time. So in particular, we have some wonderful tech artists on the team who've been developing these unique shaders. So a lot of these, the edge effects, the blob effect, a lot of this was done by Sam Mazer. And then also Saurav Day has been doing our memory shaders, ghost shaders, the custom unique color changing shaders, which let you map out different areas of objects to procedurally change the color over time. And this falls in line with our aquatic retro-futuristic art style, as I've been calling it, which is sort of like a lo-fi, late 80s, early 90s, like Tron sort of bioluminescent style. So we've been trying to keep it pretty simple, pretty minimal. And really feature the actors that you're interacting with, so everything else be more muted. And so now we're back in level 1. And yeah, I mean, primarily we were excited to show you guys that between midterm and now, we've developed out a second phase of the life cycle of the blob. We've also built out the core elements of 2 levels, develops more goal-oriented gameplay. And our next steps will be to continue to feature different actors and puzzles associated with those actors. 1 more level and continue to polish these levels. So